As a seasoned divorce lawyer, I was calm and professional, having witnessed countless marital dramas. When yet another woman, betrayed and furious, walked into my office, I expected it to be just another routine case. Help her gather evidence, fight for her rights, make the cheating husband pay. But when the hotel surveillance video played, and the woman getting intimate with my client's husband turned her face, I felt like I'd been struck by lightning. That familiar figure was my wife, the woman I'd loved for years. Overnight, I went from observer to participant. My wife's betrayal, my mother-in-law's blatant lies, the client's ambiguously probing questions fueled by desire for revenge. Today, I took on a new case. A woman sat across from me, eyes slightly red-rimmed, yet desperately trying to maintain a calm facade. "I want a divorce," she said, her voice trembling. "He cheated on me." The words were squeezed out, laced with suppressed rage. I nodded, motioning for her to continue, offering no immediate comment. "I want him to leave with nothing," she stated her main demand, "and I absolutely must get custody of our child." I looked at her, her eyes filled with uncertainty about the future, yet she forced herself to appear resolute. I paused for a few seconds, organizing my thoughts, knowing that what I was about to say might not be what she wanted to hear. "Regarding your husband's infidelity, I understand how you feel," I began. "However, legally, the act of cheating itself won't automatically result in him leaving with nothing." The color drained from her face. Clearly, this was not the answer she expected. Judges do consider the fault of a party when dividing assets, and they might lean slightly in your favor based on their discretion. But the outcome of someone walking away with absolutely nothing is extremely difficult to achieve in practice, unless there are very special circumstances or both parties voluntarily agree. Her fingers tightened around her purse strap, knuckles turning white. "What about the child? He's only 5 years old." Her voice became noticeably urgent, tinged with a hint of pleading. "The decision regarding child custody is primarily based on what is in the child's best interest for their growth and development," I explained. A 5-year-old has already passed the typical 2-year mark where the mother is usually considered to have a greater advantage due to breastfeeding. The court will generally take into account various factors, such as both parties' financial conditions, living environment, educational background, and time spent with the child. Simply put, custody is usually awarded to the party who is financially more stable and can provide a more stable life for the child. I'd seen this countless times. Looking at her pale face, I continued to explain in as calm a tone as possible. "So, counting on the infidelity alone to make him lose all his assets is very unlikely. Legally, the penalty for the at-fault party is more reflected in divorce damages or compensation. But this is a different concept from leaving with nothing." She remained silent. Regarding child custody, besides financial condition, the court considers many other factors. For instance, who has been the primary caregiver for the child long-term? Does the nature of your jobs allow for sufficient time to spend with the child? And the child's own wishes. Though a 5-year-old's ability to express themselves is limited, judges sometimes take it into account appropriately. What you need to do is gather as much evidence as possible against him, as well as proof that you are more suitable to raise the child. For example, proof of your stable income, a good living environment, and records of every little detail of how you've cared for the child. These details can all become key factors in fighting for custody in court. I try to make my voice sound both professional and empathetic. She pulled her phone from her bag, swiped on the screen a few times, and then handed it to me. On the screen was a photo. The background of the photo seemed to be a private room in a restaurant, the lighting somewhat dim. It showed a man's profile and a woman's back. The man was turned towards the woman, saying something, their posture intimate. The woman, viewed from the back, wore a simple beige dress, her long hair casually draped over her shoulders. "This is the evidence of his affair," she said, her voice still suppressed, but with a trace of subtle expectation, as if hoping this photo would be the final straw. I examined the photo carefully. The man's profile, based on her description, should be her husband. But the woman's back. I frowned slightly. That back, and the style of that dress, for some reason, struck me with a sense of inexplicable familiarity. It was as if I had seen it somewhere before. But my professional discipline quickly suppressed this insignificant conjecture. I couldn't jump to any conclusions based on a blurred back view and a slight feeling of familiarity, much less reveal it in front of the person involved. "This photo," I said, handing the phone back to her, my tone remaining calm and objective, "from a legal perspective, has limited probative value." The faint hope on her face quickly dimmed. "It can prove that your husband and a woman were at a restaurant, and their behavior might have been relatively intimate," I continued. But based solely on a back view photo, it's difficult to directly define it as adultery in the legal sense, like cohabitation or other more explicit evidence. She didn't speak, just quietly took back her phone. "I understand your eagerness to find evidence," I said, slowing my pace. "But in the process of collecting evidence, it is crucial to ensure the methods are legal. Illegally obtained evidence might not only be inadmissible in court, but could even put you in a disadvantageous position." She looked up, her eyes showing a hint of bewilderment. "For example, you cannot secretly install listening devices, track, and secretly photograph people in private places. These actions are illegal." "Then, what should I do?" Her voice was somewhat helpless. "You can pay attention to some of his unusual behaviors in his daily life," I advised. "For instance, anomalies in communication records, frequent, unusual calls or message exchanges, changes in spending records, unexplained large expenditures, or spending at unusual times, unusual whereabouts, if he often doesn't come home at night, or is vague about where he's been. This information, if obtainable through legal channels, such as information from shared accounts between husband and wife, or clues he inadvertently leaves behind, can all serve as circumstantial evidence. Furthermore, if you can find direct evidence proving he has an improper relationship with another person, such as intimate chat logs, emails, or clearer photos or videos that explicitly point to an improper relationship, that would be more powerful. But obtaining these, similarly, must ensure the legality of the means," I stressed. "For example, things he voluntarily shows you, or things you unintentionally see in a public place." I paused for a moment, allowing her time to digest the information. "The most crucial thing is that all evidence must form a complete chain, corroborating each other, to be most likely accepted by the court. This requires patience and meticulousness." Her brows were tightly furrowed, clearly trying hard to understand and remember every word I said. A few days later, she sat across from me again. This time, though tiredness still lingered in her eyes, a trace of urgency and subtle excitement flickered in her brows. I got something," she said, her voice a little hesitant. She took a USB drive from her bag, placed it gently on the table, and pushed it towards me. "What's this?" I asked. "It's surveillance footage from the hotel," she said, her eyes fixed on mine. "A few days ago, I remembered him saying he was going to a business conference in a nearby city one weekend, but something about it always fell off." Her voice quickened. "So I went to that hotel he often mentioned. I told the hotel staff that I thought I'd lost a very important necklace in their lobby that day, and I wanted to see the surveillance footage. They initially refused, but I kept pleading, saying the necklace was priceless to me, and they finally reluctantly agreed to let me view footage from a specific time slot." She paused, swallowing, "And then I saw it. I saw him and that woman going into the elevator together, and then the footage showed them entering a room, and they didn't come out for a long time. I saw the room number. Later, I went back to the hotel manager and was direct. I told them my husband was having an affair, and this video was crucial evidence that I had to have. At first, they were still hesitant and tried to stonewall, but I told them that if they didn't cooperate, I would consider other avenues, even reporting to the police that my husband might be involved in illegal activities there. That's when they finally relented and copied the video for me. Her account was a little jumbled, but the core meaning was clear. I picked up the USB drive, but didn't connect it to the computer immediately. "Are you certain the people in the video are your husband and the woman you mentioned based on the photos?" "Absolutely certain," she replied instantly, her tone leaving no room for doubt. "Even though you can still only see the woman's side and back. My husband's face is perfectly clear. What's more, the exact time they entered a room was precisely when he claimed he was attending that business conference." I nodded. "This video footage, if the clarity and content are as you've described, will be much stronger evidence than just photos. At the very least, it proves your husband entered a hotel room with a specific person of the opposite sex at a particular time and remained there for a significant period. Legally, this can serve as important evidence to prove he engaged in inappropriate relations." She held her breath, seemingly waiting for my final assessment. "However, I shifted my tone, the way you obtained this evidence, claiming you lost something, then pressuring them with a suspicion of an affair, which led the hotel to finally provide it. The opposing lawyer might raise procedural questions about this. That said, a hotel's corridors and lobby are public areas, and surveillance there is generally not considered an invasion of absolute privacy. The key lies in the reason the hotel ultimately agreed to provide it. If we can prove the hotel provided it voluntarily, or if you had obtained it through legitimate means, then there shouldn't be a significant issue." The excitement on her face faded slightly, replaced by a hint of worry. "So, what do we do now?" she asked, a little hesitant. "We'll first secure and analyze this video evidence," I replied. "In the meantime, we can also try approaching from other angles to further strengthen the chain of evidence. For instance, now that you know the hotel and the approximate time, we could try to investigate your husband's hotel registration records. Through certain channels, it's often possible to inquire about hotel check-in information. If we can obtain clear registration records with his identification details and check-in time, and they corroborate the video, that would be even more powerful." Her eyes brightened. "Also," I continued, my tone becoming more cautious, "if conditions permit, and you can ensure legality, you could consider installing cameras in some common areas of your home. For example, the living room, or other places where your husband might engage in suspicious communication or behavior. However, it's crucial to note that the installation location must be in shared family spaces and must not infringe upon his absolute personal privacy areas, such as the interior of his private study or the bathroom. Furthermore, you should ideally be able to prove that the cameras were installed for legitimate purposes like family safety, rather than solely to spy on his privacy. Otherwise, evidence obtained this way could similarly face questions about its legality." At home?" she asked, a little hesitant. "Yes," I confirmed. "If he tends to have inappropriate chats with someone else at home or exhibits unusual behavior, cameras might capture it. Most importantly, we need to string together all legally obtainable evidence to form an undeniable factual basis." She fell silent. I softened my tone. "But we need to take every step carefully, ensuring we stay within the legal framework to maximize the protection of your rights." She didn't immediately follow my previous suggestion to install cameras at home, nor did she start looking into her husband's hotel booking records right away. Before doing any of that, she chose what she considered the most direct approach. Taking the USB drive containing the hotel surveillance footage, she went to see her in-laws. She plugged the USB drive into their computer and opened the video file. The living room fell into a dead silence. All that could be heard was the faint background noise from the video, alongside her husband's unmistakable face and the woman's back as they walked into the elevator, disappeared from the floor, and then appeared at the hotel room door. Her father-in-law, a retired official, watched the screen, his face ashen and silent. Her mother-in-law, meanwhile, began to sob softly beside him. When the video finished, her mother-in-law was the first to speak, her voice choked with tears. What's going on here? How could something like this happen in our family?" She watched them, waiting, hoping for even a shred of justice, or at the very least, genuine sympathy for what she had gone through. However, her father-in-law remained silent for a long while, then let out a heavy sigh before saying, "Family harmony is paramount. What he did was certainly wrong. We'll have a serious talk with him." Her mother-in-law quickly chimed in. Yes, absolutely. How could he do something so foolish? Don't worry, we'll make him apologize to you, and make sure he never dares to do it again." As she listened to these words, her heart sank bit by bit. "What I mean is," she struggled to keep her voice steady, "I want a divorce." "No." Her father-in-law's voice suddenly rose, filled with unquestionable authority. "Absolutely not." Her mother-in-law also became anxious, grabbing her hand. "The child is still so young. How can you get a divorce? Marital spats can be resolved. Isn't there anything you can't settle by talking things through properly?" "He cheated," she reminded them. "Men sometimes make mistakes." Her father-in-law frowned, choosing his words carefully. "No matter how enticing affairs might seem, the family is what truly matters. What's most important now is to find a way to bring him back, not to break up this family." Furthermore, her father-in-law cleared his throat, his tone becoming serious. "He's at a crucial point in his career right now. He's about to be promoted. He's a key leader being groomed by his organization. At a time like this, there absolutely cannot be any slip-ups. You definitely can't blow things up and affect his future." Her mother-in-law nodded repeatedly from the side. Yes, absolutely. If he gets promoted, won't that be good for the whole family and for the child? You absolutely mustn't make a scene at his workplace. That would ruin him." She looked at these two elders, who she had once considered kind-faced. Now, their faces showed only anxiety for their son's future and a fierce desire to protect the family's reputation. As for her pain, her humiliation, they seemed to have become things that could be easily set aside, or even required to make way for more important matters. A few days later, in the afternoon, my assistant, Chun, knocked on my office door. Lawyerly, "The lady from before is here again. Things don't seem good." I told her to come in. When she appeared before me again, I could barely recognize her. She was wearing a dark, long-sleeved, high-neck top, even though the weather was starting to turn warmer. On the exposed half of her cheek, there was a clearly visible bruise, and the corner of her mouth was red, swollen, and cracked. Her eyes were full of fear and exhaustion. "Have a seat." I tried to make my voice sound calm. She sat down in the chair opposite me, her hands tightly clasped together, her knuckles white from the strain. She had barely opened her mouth before her voice broke into a sob. I handed her a glass of warm water and some tissues. She took a few deep breaths, trying to compose herself. "My in-laws, they told my husband everything." Her voice was very low. "They told him to sort this out properly, so it doesn't affect his future." I nodded, gesturing for her to continue. "When he came back today, he had a huge fight with me. He said I didn't know what was good for me, that I was immature, that I was trying to ruin him." Her tears finally couldn't be held back and fell in large drops. And then he got violent. These words were like a boulder thrown into a calm lake, sending a ripple through me. Looking at the injuries on her face, I already understood. "He hit me." She finally raised her head, looked me directly in the eye, her gaze filled with humiliation and despair. This is the first time he's ever hit me." I remained silent, waiting for her to continue. Luckily, she sniffled and shakily pulled another USB drive from her bag. It was slightly smaller than the last one. "Luckily, I listened to your advice last time. Although it was a few days late, I still installed a hidden camera in our living room. He doesn't know. This is the video of him hitting me." She placed the USB drive on the table and pushed it towards me. My gaze fell upon that small USB drive. Out of professional prudence, I needed to immediately confirm the authenticity and evidentiary value of these video contents. I first picked up the USB drive she had given me earlier, which contained hotel surveillance footage. She claimed it was proof of her husband's infidelity. I inserted the USB drive into the USB port on my office computer. The folder opened, and there was only one video file inside. I took a deep breath and double-clicked it. On the screen, the hotel elevator lobby footage began to play. It was a bit shaky, but still reasonably clear. A man, fitting the description of the client's husband, had his arm around a woman's shoulders, and the two walked intimately into the elevator. Then, the scene switched to the floor hallway. They exited the elevator and walked toward the room door. The man used a key card, opened the door, and the two entered one after the other. The woman's face was never clearly visible. Mostly, it was her profile and back. But when, for a brief moment, she turned her head slightly, seemingly smiling at the man, revealing a small part of her cheek, my heart suddenly stopped. That fleeting profile, that hairstyle, that beige dress that had felt strangely familiar in a photo. No, impossible. I leaned forward abruptly, my eyes fixed on the woman's figure in the footage, repeatedly dragging the progress bar back and forth. Every subtle movement, every familiar outline. I felt as if struck by lightning. My mind went blank. It was my wife. I couldn't believe my eyes. The woman I deeply loved, whom I believed was pure and flawless, who had been by my side through everything. How could it be her? I lost my parents when I was young, and my grandmother raised me single-handedly. When I was in high school, my only grandmother also left me, and for a time, the world was just me alone. It was her, during my darkest university days, who shone into my life like a ray of sunshine. She was by my side for 4 whole years, supporting me through confusion and difficulties with her smile and encouragement. It was she who, when I hesitated about pursuing further studies, told me firmly, "You can definitely do it. Go take the graduate entrance exam. I believe in you." The fact that I am where I am today, having become lawyerly quite well known in this firm and having handled many complex cases, is to a great extent because of her support and dedication. I thought I possessed the most stable happiness in the world. But however happy life felt, at that moment, I felt how fragile it was. It shattered with a gentle touch. She coughed softly, jolting me back to reality. I turned my head to look at her, pain still etched on my face. "Attorney Lee, are you all right?" She had noticed something was wrong with me. My throat felt terribly parched. I looked at her, at this woman who had been betrayed and beaten by her husband, and was now seeking legal help. Then, I spoke with difficulty, the woman with your husband in the surveillance video. I paused. "Is my wife?" The air instantly froze. The concern and questions on her face vanished, replaced by utter disbelief the moment she heard those words, her mouth slightly agape. Time seemed to stop flowing at that instant. Outside the office, the sounds of colleagues leaving for the day were already audible. Like a puppet drained of all strength, I mechanically stood up. She also followed suit, looking somewhat lost and distraught. carrying our own shattered truths. The two of us walked out of the law firm in silence. Night had begun to shroud the city. Attorney Lee, she broke the silence first, her voice still trembling with a trace of disbelief. Let's go back to my rented place. We can go over the evidence again. My mind was a complete mess right now, having almost lost the ability to think independently, so I just numbly nodded. She drove, and I sat in the passenger seat, the entire way silent. Soon, the car stopped below an older residential building. Her rented apartment wasn't large and was simply furnished, but it was quite tidy. I sat on the sofa in the small living room, and she poured me a glass of water. Thanks. I took the cup. She sat beside me, the air thick with an inexpressible sense of oppression and awkwardness. We sat in silence, facing each other. The USB drive still lay quietly in my briefcase, but neither of us had the desire to discuss it anymore. Suddenly, she leaned close to me. Her warm breath almost sprayed onto my face. I stared in shock at her enlarged features. Before her soft lips could touch mine, I snapped back to reality and quickly recoiled, dodging away. I looked at her, my eyes filled with shock and confusion. A trace of hurt flashed across her face, immediately replaced by a look of resolve and madness. He's seeing other women outside. Why should we be the ones to suffer like this? She stared at me, her voice tinged with hysteria. I want to take revenge on him. She paused, her eyes burning as she looked at me. Don't you want to take revenge on your wife? My heart sank abruptly. Revenge? Yes, my heart was filled with the anger and pain of betrayal at this moment. I wished I could find that woman immediately and get a clear explanation for everything. But I looked at this woman before me, who had also been deeply hurt. I don't want to become like them, I said slowly, my voice not loud but unusually firm. As a person, you must have the most basic moral and ethical boundaries, especially since I am a lawyer. I looked at her, this woman who had also been betrayed. In her eyes, a rage similar to my own burned, but mixed with a reckless madness. I took a deep breath, pushing down the turmoil in my heart. I understand how you feel. My voice was a little hoarse, but trying to punish one wrong with another only makes us become the very people we hate. She stared at me blankly. I stood up. It's getting late. I should head back. I needed to calm down to face all this on my own. Leaving the complex where she lived, the night wind blew on my face, carrying a hint of coolness, but couldn't disperse the heat and chaos in my heart. I didn't go straight home, but went back to the office first. The office was empty. I inserted the USB drive containing the hotel surveillance footage into the computer again and copied the video clip on my phone. Only after doing all this did I walk with heavy steps towards home. The images from the video kept replaying in my mind, my wife's figure and her intimate actions with that man. Arriving home, the house was quiet. The living room light was on, and faint sounds came from the kitchen. It was my mother-in-law. She was wearing an apron, busy by the stove, preparing dinner. Hearing the door open, she poked her head out, her face carrying her usual gentle smile. You're back? Go wash your hands quickly. Dinner's almost ready. I didn't say anything. My throat felt blocked by something. I changed my shoes and walked straight up to her. She seemed to sense something was wrong. Her smile faded slightly. What is it? You look terrible. I didn't answer, just silently took out my phone, opened the video file I had just copied, and handed it to her. The image on the phone screen was particularly jarring. My mother-in-law was initially puzzled, but when she saw the figures in the video clearly, her expression instantly froze. She looked at the screen in disbelief, then looked up at me, her lips trembling slightly, as if she wanted to say something but couldn't make a sound. The video wasn't long and finished playing quickly. The air was filled with a heavy silence. This is... She finally found her voice. I watched her, waiting for her reaction, though I held no hope in my heart. As expected, after the initial shock, the panic on her face was quickly replaced by a complex emotion. She took a deep breath, as if steeling herself, then looked at me, her tone unexpectedly becoming forceful. What couple doesn't make mistakes? She was just momentarily confused. Can't you just forgive her this one time? I almost thought I'd misheard. Forgive? She looked at me, her eyes showing not a trace of sympathy for me, her son-in-law who had been betrayed, but rather a hint of reproach. Are you saying you have absolutely no fault in this? These words, like a needle, sharply pierced my heart. You should really reflect on yourself. Her voice started to rise. All day, all you know is work, work, work. When have you ever truly spent time with her? Have you considered how lonely she is, alone at home? You've been married for so many years, and you won't even have a child with her. How do you think that makes her feel? Have you given her the sense of security and family warmth that a woman truly desires? Every word my mother-in-law uttered was like a sharp blade, once again slicing my already shattered heart into 1,000 pieces. I looked at this elderly woman, who I had once considered kind. At this moment, her face showed only reckless protection for her daughter and accusations against me, her neglectful husband. It was as if all the fault originated with me, and her daughter, the woman in the video being intimate with another man, had instead become a victim worthy of forgiveness, even sympathy. Just then, the door lock clicked softly. My wife returned. She was carrying the latest model bag and had a relaxed smile on her face. Seeing both me and her mother there, she seemed a little surprised. "Mom, Li Ming, you're both here?" Before I could speak, my mother-in-law jumped in first, grabbing her hand, her voice full of grievance and anger. "Daughter, you're back at last. Look at him. He got his hands on some messy stuff from who knows where and is using it to question me." "Question you?" My wife looked at me. She didn't even ask what he was talking about. "Mom is right," she said, her voice calm. "Matters between husband and wife are inherently complex. He's busy with work, doesn't care about the home, doesn't care about me. Does that mean I have to live like a widow?" I looked at her in disbelief. This person I once thought I understood best, the one I felt closest to. The child. I uttered the two words with difficulty, remembering my mother-in-law's earlier accusation. She scoffed, a mix of disdain and frank admission. "A child? I never really wanted one from the start. You were the one who was so eager. Why would I ruin my figure and give up my freedom just to have a child? Is it wrong for me not to work?" She looked around the exquisitely decorated house. "Isn't this house, this car, what a man like you should be earning? I sacrificed my career ambitions for this family. Isn't that enough?" Sacrifice? All I felt was absurdity. So I looked at her, asking word by word. "You're admitting what's in the video? So what if I admit it?" She met my gaze without a hint of shame, but rather with a defiant challenge. "Li Ming, don't forget, we both graduated from law school." Her lips even curved into a mocking smile. "Even if I cheated, what can you do? Community property, it'll be split just as the law dictates. Do you think you can make me leave with nothing? Don't be naive." Every word was like a heavy hammer, slamming hard against my heart. Yes, she was speaking the truth. The law, the profession I once prided myself on, had now become the sharpest weapon she used to stab me. I knew better than anyone else that when it came to asset division, even if she was at fault, it would be difficult for me to leave her with nothing. Their conversation, their entire way of thinking, utterly shocked me. I looked at the entitled expressions on their faces and trembled with rage. My head was buzzing, filled with nothing but the words absurd, unfair, and deception. I spun around abruptly and stormed into the kitchen. Standing by the stove, I snatched up a kitchen knife. The icy feel of the metal, instead of sobering me up, only made the fire of my rage burn hotter. Clutching the knife, I rushed back into the living room. They clearly hadn't expected me to react like this. The mockery on their faces froze instantly, replaced by sheer terror. I didn't charge at them. My intention wasn't actually to harm them. I just wanted to terrify them, to make them understand I was at my breaking point, pushed to the absolute edge. I raised the knife, putting every ounce of my strength into a furious chop at the sofa beside me. Crash! The blade bit deep into the thick sofa cushion with a heavy thud. The sofa was ripped open, its stuffing spilling out. This loud impact, coupled with my contorted expression, successfully scared them deathly pale. "Get out!" I roared. I advanced step by step, closing in on them. "You two, get out of here!" I pointed towards the door, still clutching the knife. "What else do you think I have left to lose?" I looked at them, my eyes cold. The barefoot don't fear those who wear shoes. I'd heard and analyzed that phrase countless times as a lawyer, in consultations and courtrooms. Now I applied it to myself. I'm all alone, no parents, and now I don't even have a home. My voice carried a desperate, all-or-nothing resolve. "You still want to take my house? Take my car?" I sneered, watching their bodies tremble with fear. "In your dreams. Do you think you'll live long enough to claim it?" My voice was dripping with menace, each word ground out through clenched teeth. "If you don't leave here with nothing, I'll kill you both." I knew that was illegal, extreme, but in that moment, all I cared about was making them afraid, making them understand they couldn't just walk all over me. My wife and mother-in-law were utterly terrified by my appearance. Not a trace of arrogance or contempt was left on their faces, only pure terror. My mother-in-law grabbed my wife's hand, and they stumbled backward towards the door. They even forgot their bags. The door was flung open and then slammed shut. Suddenly, I was alone in the living room, standing there with the sofa I'd just slashed. I stood holding the knife, my chest heaving. The rage from earlier gradually subsided, replaced by a profound emptiness and exhaustion. I stared at the knife in my hand, at the ruined sofa, at this place that was supposed to be home. What had I become? I had actually turned into this. A man who had lost all reason, resorting to violence and threats to solve problems. A failure. Slowly, I sank to my knees and let the kitchen knife clatter to the floor. Clutching my head in my hands, I squeezed my eyes shut in agony. I thought I had everything: a stable career, a loving family, a wife I adored. Turns out, it was all just what I thought I had. Everything I'd been proud of, everything I considered my bottom line and principles, shattered so easily in the face of such immense pain and betrayal. I was a lawyer. I should have used legal means, the law itself, to defend my rights. Instead, I'd chosen the most primitive, most extreme path: violence and threats. The next day back at the office, the first thing I did was transfer the case to Lawyer Zhang. Lawyer Zhang is my colleague, experienced and reliable. I briefly explained the case to him, omitting the parts that involved me personally, only saying that the other woman involved with the client's husband had some private connection to me and it was inconvenient for me to continue representing her. He understood and took over the case. I thought the matter, at least on a professional level, could be put to rest for the time being. However, a few days later, she contacted me again. Over the phone, her voice still sounded somewhat helpless. Lawyerly, I know the case has been transferred to Lawyer Zhang, but there are some things I'd still like to hear your opinion on. I agreed to meet her in the office's conference room. When she arrived, her expression was much calmer than when she had been at my place. Lawyer Zhang is very professional, she began. He's given me a lot of helpful advice. That's good, I nodded. It's just, she paused, her gaze turning to me with a hint of inquiry. There are some things I just feel you might understand my situation better. I understood what she meant. After all, in a sense, we were kindred spirits. Regarding the evidence of your husband's domestic abuse, Lawyer Zhang should tell you how to further secure and use it. I tried to steer the conversation back to the case itself. Yes, he did, she replied, but didn't continue on that topic. She was silent for a few seconds, then quietly said, Lawyer Liar, are you okay? I hadn't expected her to ask that. I'm fine, I answered, my tone a bit stiff. She seemed to sense my insincerity, and a complex emotion flickered in her eyes. Sympathy, and something else I couldn't quite name. That day, thank you. It was nothing. For the rest of the conversation, she did indeed ask some questions about how to deal with potential settlement offers from her husband's side and how to fight for greater property rights. Based on my professional knowledge as a lawyer, I gave her as objective an analysis and advice as possible, stopping there, as I was no longer her representing lawyer. Towards the end of the conversation, she suddenly said, Lawyerly, this period has been so difficult. Her voice was quiet, tinged with weariness. Holding on by myself, sometimes I really feel like I'm about to break. I looked at her and didn't speak. She lowered her head slightly, her fingers unconsciously tracing the rim of the water cup. If you don't mind, maybe we could chat occasionally just to help each other through. She raised her eyes, her gaze carrying a hint of cautious probing and a veiled expectation. My heart skipped a beat, and I immediately grew wary. Her words, and the look in her eyes right then, instantly reminded me of that sudden action of hers at a rented place that day. I think it's better if we each handle our own matters, I said, trying to keep my tone calm. Lawyer Zhang will provide you with professional help. The hint of expectation on her face dimmed like a candle flame in the wind. She softly murmured, and said nothing more. As I saw her out of the office, she reached the door and suddenly turned around. Lawyerly, she looked at me, her gaze a little distant. Actually, sometimes I think, since they can treat us like that. She didn't finish her sentence, but the implied meaning in her unfinished words was clear enough. I frowned. I'll be going now. She seemed to sense my displeasure, quickly said that, turned, and left. I stood there, watching her back disappear down the end of the corridor, my heart a mix of emotions. What she called discussing strategies didn't seem to be entirely about the case itself. The intentional or unintentional probing, the gazes and words carrying a certain implication, made me feel a strange pressure. I understood her pain and anger from being betrayed and hurt, but some of her thoughts were already starting to stray from a normal path. I tried to push down the jumble of thoughts and refocus on my work. However, a few days later, Lawyer Zhang sought me out. His expression held a mix of seriousness and bewilderment. Lawyerly, about that case you transferred to me earlier, the lady's case. He paused, seeming to choose his words carefully. What about it?" I asked, a faint, uneasy premonition stirring within me. "The court date is in 15 days, Lawyer Zhang said. My heart plummeted. 15 days? For a divorce case involving domestic violence, infidelity, and a child custody battle. This speed was unusually fast. That quickly, I couldn't help but press. With the child custody issue involved, can a decision really be reached in such a short time? Is she fully prepared?" "Yes, I found it quite unexpected too." Lawyer Zhang pushed up his glasses, a hint of confusion on his face. The opposing side doesn't seem to have raised many objections. A lot of the procedures went unusually smoothly, almost as if they were completely cooperating with the progress. I confirmed with my client. She said she was confident. Cooperating? Confident? What exactly had she done to cause such a dramatic shift in the situation? Before I could ponder this further, my phone rang. The caller ID showed it was her. My wife. No, I should say, the woman who was soon to be my ex-wife. Her voice came through the receiver, utterly calm, without a ripple of emotion, as if discussing a trivial matter unrelated to herself. "Li Ming, I've thought about the divorce agreement you proposed earlier." I agree. For a moment, I almost thought I'd misheard, doubting if the person on the other end was even her. "All the terms." "I agree," she continued, her tone remaining flat, without any rise or fall. Then, she added a sentence like a bombshell, completely shattering my understanding. "Including leaving with nothing." I stood there holding the phone, my mind blank, unable to speak for a long time. How was this possible? Just a few days ago, she and her mother had stood before me, so self-righteous, so arrogant and overbearing. They had accused me, condemned me, pushing all the blame onto me. She had even quoted legal articles, mocking me with a professional tone, asserting that I could never make her leave with nothing. Now, she was accepting everything completely? This defied logic. This was completely out of character for her, and utterly inconsistent with any attitude or determination she had shown before. "Are you sure?" I tried to keep my voice steady. "I'm sure," she replied. I couldn't detect any emotion in her voice. No reluctance, no anger, not even a trace of lingering attachment. 2 p.m. See you at the Civil Affairs Bureau in trance. Then, she casually hung up the phone, giving me no chance to ask further questions. In my hand, I still held the divorce agreement I had drafted long ago, expecting it would require countless difficult negotiations and verbal battles to finalize. At that moment, it felt so unreal, like a piece of waste paper. In the afternoon, I arrived at the Civil Affairs Bureau on time. She was already there, alone, her face still devoid of expression. There were no arguments, no accusations, not even extra eye contact. We silently completed all the procedures, signing documents, notarization, and then there was that thin red brand new divorce certificate. Holding that thin divorce certificate, I walked out of the Civil Affairs Bureau entrance. It was all over, incredibly fast. So fast it left me feeling flustered and unsettled. Yet I felt a strong, indescribable sense of utter bewilderment. This wasn't the ending I had anticipated. It went too smoothly. So smoothly it was like a meticulously crafted script, but I had no idea of its plot or purpose. Why the sudden change? What made her give up all the property she had once cared so much about? My marriage had just ended so hastily. That evening, she asked me to meet her again. She said she wanted my help discussing the upcoming court hearing. We met in a quiet cafe. As soon as we met, she looked at me and said softly, lawyerly, "Shouldn't you be thanking me?" My hand holding the coffee cup paused slightly. Thank her? In my mind, I instantly saw my ex-wife's face, calm to the point of indifference, and her crisp, decisive words. "I agree, including leaving with nothing." I looked at her, trying to find the answer on her face. She didn't answer directly, but let out a long sigh. "My son," she began slowly, her voice carrying a hint of relief mixed with a mother's deep sorrow. "He said he doesn't want to live with me anymore." I was taken aback. "He said Mum works too hard, and taking care of him alone would be even harder." She continued, "He told me not to worry, that when he's grown, when he turns 18, he'll come find me, and he'll take care of me in the future." Her eyes were slightly red-rimmed, but a trace of a bitter smile touched her lips. With my child saying something like that, what else could I possibly insist on? So, I'm no longer fighting for custody. Now it's just a matter of property division. I understood. With her giving up the fight for custody, the case would naturally become much simpler, and the hearing would be quicker. "And your husband?" At the same time I filed for divorce, she cut me off, a flicker of cold light flashing in her eyes. "Your ex-wife hasn't been idle either. They're already living together, she said, her tone calm, as if stating a fact that had nothing to do with her. The reason your ex-wife agreed so readily to leave with nothing is because she knew my husband was also getting a divorce. Being with you, a lawyer, how could that compare to the prestige of being a leader's wife? She looked at me, her eyes holding a hint of sympathy, or perhaps the shared understanding of fellow travelers on a rough road. So, of course she agreed to leave with nothing so decisively, just to get rid of you as quickly as possible and rush towards her bright future. So that was it. So, that so-called full acceptance, that unbelievable leaving with nothing, was actually backed by such calculation and sordidness. In the days that followed, she came to the law firm almost every day, looking for me. Ostensibly, she was there to consult Lawyer Zhang about the progress of her lawsuit, but more often than not, she'd find her way to my office door. My colleagues were a bit awkward about it. After all, this case had been officially transferred to Lawyer Zhang. They knew her visit wasn't entirely about the case itself. Towards evening, she would always appear as I was packing up, ready to leave. Then, she would ask me to take her home. I would usually fall silent for a few seconds, then agree. Along the way, she would talk a lot. About her case, about her son's choices, about how she was dealing with her husband's lawyer. But throughout the conversation, she would always, subtly or directly, steer the topic towards our shared experience. Lawyerly, she'd say, how could they be so heartless? Just for their own benefit, with complete disregard for our feelings. Shouldn't we consider ourselves as well? Her eyes would meet mine in the rearview mirror, carrying a hint of searching, hard to read. I knew what she was testing. It was the line she tried to cross that night in her rented apartment. My heart was in turmoil. The pain of betrayal, like a tide, often surged up and engulfed me. The people I once trusted and were closest to gave me the deepest wound. In some vulnerable moments, a fleeting thought of revenge would even cross my mind. An eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. But whenever this thought arose, I would remember that night, the scene of me holding a kitchen knife and hacking at the sofa. Remember my frenzy and despair when I roared. Someone with nothing to lose fears nothing. That feeling of losing control scared me. I didn't want to become that kind of person. Even less did I want to become like them, harming innocent people or crossing moral and legal boundaries just to satisfy my own desires or need for revenge. I can't. I looked at the road ahead, my voice calm and firm. This was what I would say every time I responded to her probing. I can't do that. She would fall silent, waiting for me to continue. I am a lawyer, I said slowly, as if these words were not just my profession, but also my armor, my principles. If I don't even have the most basic moral bottom line, what right do I have to stand here and fight for my client's rights? What right do I have to talk about fairness and justice? What right do I have to continue doing this job? Over the past 2 weeks, I had indeed taught her a great deal. Not just the interpretation of legal statutes, but more importantly, how to adjust her mindset and fight for her maximum legal rights in the face of adversity. Our interaction also gradually changed from initial tension and probing to ease and comfort. Of course, this comfort always stayed within a clear boundary. I didn't forget my identity, and even less did I forget her suggestive glances and words from before. Today was her court date. After going over all the final details with her and reminding her of everything she needed to pay attention to, I left her and Lawyer Zhang to handle it. Although I was no longer her representing lawyer, this case still held a certain significance for me. The result didn't surprise me. Lawyer Zhang recounted the trial process briefly afterwards. Initially, after hearing both sides' statements and evidence concerning the husband's infidelity, the judge clearly acknowledged the husband's misconduct. Regarding property division, the judge's initial inclination was, considering her as the non-faulting party, to award her about 60% of the assets. This, in regular divorce cases, was already considered a relatively good proportion. But this was not enough. Following my earlier advice, just when her husband's lawyer thought the case was decided, I had her, or rather, suggested Lawyer Zhang guide her, present that critical piece of evidence during the final statement. The domestic violence video and the hospital's medical report clearly documenting her injuries. When that video recording her husband's brutal actions and violent behavior was played in court, the atmosphere of the entire trial reportedly froze instantly. Combined with the injury assessment issued by an authoritative institution, the facts were already undeniable. The judge's expression became exceptionally serious. Finally, the judge delivered the verdict in court. Based on the husband's serious misconduct in the marriage, especially his infidelity and domestic violence against the wife, the court ruled to award her 80% of the couple's joint property. Hearing this result, A weight was finally lifted off my chest.